The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the general store in Wasco, California, and Rose Dalton knew immediately that her life was about to change in ways she had never imagined, though not in the way she had hoped. Dust swirled around the wheels as she peered through the small window, her hands trembling in her lap, her heart beating so fast she thought it might burst from her chest. She had traveled all the way from Missouri, responding to an advertisement for a mail-order bride, placing all her hopes and dreams into the hands of a man she had never met, a rancher named Walter Higgins, who had written her 3 letters that seemed kind enough, if a bit formal. The driver opened the door and offered his weathered hand to help her down. Rose took it, her fingers barely gripping his palm, and stepped onto the hard, packed dirt street. The afternoon sun blazed overhead, typical for August in the San Joaquin Valley in 1884, and the heat pressed down on her like a heavy blanket. She smoothed her gray traveling dress, the nicest one she owned, and adjusted her bonnet, trying to still the nervous flutter in her stomach. "Miss Dalton." A voice called from near the storefront, and Rose turned to see a tall man with a thick mustache and an expression that seemed carved from granite. He wore a clean shirt and pressed trousers, his hat held formally in his hands, but his eyes swept over her with an assessing look that made her want to shrink into herself. "Yes," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Higgins, that would be me." He walked closer, circling around her slowly, and Rose felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She knew what he was seeing: a plain woman of 22 with brown hair, average height, nothing remarkable about her appearance. But it was more than that. She could feel his disappointment radiating from him like heat from a stove. "You are very quiet," he said, not as an observation but as an accusation. Rose opened her mouth to respond, but her throat had gone dry. She nodded instead, hating herself for her inability to speak up. To be charming and vivacious like other women seemed to manage so effortlessly. All her life, words had failed her in moments of stress or when meeting new people. She could write beautifully, her letters were full of warmth and thoughtfulness, but face to face, especially with strangers, her voice seemed to retreat deep inside her chest. "I expected someone with more spirit," Walter continued, his mustache twitching with displeasure. "Someone who could hold conversation at church socials, entertain guests at the ranch. I am a respected man in this community, Miss Dalton. I need a wife who can represent me properly, not a mouse who cannot even speak when spoken to." The words hit Rose like physical blows. She felt tears prickling behind her eyes but refused to let them fall, not here in the middle of the street with townspeople beginning to gather and stare. She had sold everything she owned to make this journey. She had said goodbye to the only home she had ever known. And now this man was rejecting her before they had even had a proper conversation. "Please," she whispered, finding her voice though it shook. "I just need time to adjust. The journey was long and I am tired and nervous. I can be better, I promise." Walter shook his head firmly. "No, Miss Dalton. This will not work. I am sorry you came all this way, but I cannot marry someone so withdrawn and timid. You will never fit into the life I need my wife to lead." He reached into his pocket and pulled out some bills, pressing them into her hand. "This should cover a room at the boarding house for a week and your stagecoach fare back to Missouri. I wish you well, but our arrangement is terminated." Before Rose could formulate a response, before she could even process what was happening, Walter Higgins had turned on his heel and strode away, mounting a fine black horse tied nearby and riding out of town without a backward glance. Rose stood frozen in place, the money crumpled in her fist, aware of the whispers starting up around her, the pitying looks and curious stares from strangers. "Well, I never," an older woman muttered to her companion. Rejecting a bride right off the stagecoach like that. She must have misrepresented herself in her letters, another voice suggested. Rose could not bear it. She grabbed her single carpet bag from where the driver had set it down and hurried down the street, her vision blurring with tears she could no longer contain. She did not even know where she was going, just away from the stairs and the humiliation. The boarding house, she supposed. At least Walter had given her enough money for that. She found it 2 streets over, a whitewashed building with a sign that read Mrs. Chen's boarding house in neat letters. Rose had heard that many Chinese families had settled in California, working on the railroads, and then staying to build lives in this harsh but promising land. She pushed through the door and found a small, tidy lobby with a Chinese woman behind a desk who looked up with kind eyes. "Please," Rose managed, her voice breaking. "I need a room." Mrs. Chen studied her for a moment, taking in the tear-stained face and trembling hands, and nodded. "You come. I have good room, quiet, clean. You stay as long as you need." The kindness in those simple words made Rose's tears flow harder. Mrs. Chen came around the desk and gently took her arm, leading her up a narrow staircase to a small but spotlessly clean room with a bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. Rose paid for 3 nights, not knowing if she should try to stretch the money longer or just accept defeat and book passage back to Missouri as soon as possible. "You rest now," Mrs. Chen said softly, patting Rose's hand. "Things always look better after rest." But things did not look better when Rose woke the next morning. If anything, they looked worse in the harsh light of day. She had nowhere to go, no prospects, and not enough money to survive in Wasco for more than a week unless she found work. The problem was that she had no skills that would translate into employment. She could read and write, could sew adequately, could cook simple meals, but those were skills every woman possessed. She had no training as a teacher or a nurse, the 2 most common respectable positions for women. Rose spent that first full day in her room, paralyzed by fear and shame. Mrs. Chen brought her soup for dinner, refusing payment, and sat with her for a few minutes while Rose picked at the bowl. "The man who rejects you, he is fool," Mrs. Chen said matter-of-factly. "You have good heart, I see it. Someone else will see it too." Rose wanted to believe her, but doubt had wrapped itself around her heart like iron bands. On the second day, Rose forced herself to leave the boarding house. She could not hide forever. She needed to understand this town, to see if there was any possibility of making a life here or if she should accept defeat and return home. The thought of going back to Missouri filled her with dread. Her parents had died 3 years ago within months of each other, leaving her alone. She had been living with her aunt, a bitter woman who made it clear Rose was a burden, and who had been relieved when Rose announced her plan to become a mail-order bride. Wasco was a small town, serving the surrounding ranches and farms that had sprung up in the fertile valley. The main street consisted of the general store, a saloon, a church, a blacksmith, a small bank, and a few other establishments. Beyond that, scattered houses and the vast California landscape stretched endlessly under the brilliant blue sky. It was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way, so different from the green hills of Missouri. Rose walked slowly, keeping her eyes down, hyper-aware of people looking at her. She knew the story of her rejection must have spread through the small community like wildfire. In a town this size, gossip was currency, and her humiliation was undoubtedly the most interesting thing that had happened all month. She paused in front of the general store, gathering her courage to go inside. She needed to purchase a few necessities, and she could not keep avoiding people forever. Taking a deep breath, she pushed through the door, The store was dim after the bright sunlight, smelling of coffee and tobacco and leather. Several customers browsed the aisles, and Rose heard the conversation die down as she entered. She kept her head up with effort, walking to the counter where a middle-aged man with spectacles watched her approach. "Help you, miss. I need thread," Rose said quietly. "White, if you have it. And needles." He gathered the items while Rose became aware of two women nearby, not even bothering to lower their voices. "That is her, the one Walter Higgins sent away. I heard she cannot speak more than 2 words at a time, practically mute." Well, what did she expect, coming all this way without him knowing? Those mail-order arrangements never work out. Rose paid for her purchases quickly and fled the store, her face burning. Back in her room at the boarding house, she sat on the bed and let herself cry. The women had been right about one thing. What had she expected? That a stranger would love her despite her crippling shyness. That she could somehow become a different person just by traveling to California. That evening, Mrs. Chen knocked on her door. "You come down. Eat dinner with me and my family. No good to be alone." Rose tried to decline, but Mrs. Chen was insistent, and she found herself in the boarding house's small dining room, sitting at a table with Mrs. Chen, her husband who worked at the rail yard, and their 2 children. They spoke quietly among themselves in Chinese, occasionally translating something for Rose's benefit, but they did not press her to talk. The food was delicious and different from anything Rose had eaten before, and the quiet acceptance of the family soothed something raw inside her. "You need work?" Mr. Chen asked as they finished eating. "My cousin, he runs laundry, always needs help." Rose nodded gratefully. "Yes, please, anything." The next morning, Rose found herself at Chen's Laundry, a building with huge vats of boiling water and lines of drying clothes. The work was hot and exhausting, her hands turning red and raw from the harsh soap. But Mr. Chen's cousin paid fairly and did not care that she barely spoke. The other workers were mostly Chinese women who chattered among themselves in their own language, leaving Rose in peaceful solitude. Days turned into a week, then 2. Rose fell into a rhythm: wake before dawn, work at the laundry until late afternoon, return to the boarding house too tired to think. She saved her money carefully, slowly building up enough to either stay or leave, though she still had not decided which path to take. Mrs. Chen let her pay reduced rent in exchange for helping with cleaning and cooking at the boarding house, and Rose found herself feeling something almost like contentment. At least she was useful. At least she had a purpose, even if it was not the one she had imagined. It was on a Wednesday afternoon in late September when everything changed again. Rose was hanging sheets on the drying lines behind the laundry when she heard horses approaching fast. The thundering of hooves made her look up, and she saw 3 men racing down the street, pursued by what looked like the sheriff and a deputy. Gunshots rang out, sharp cracks that made Rose drop the sheet and freeze in terror. The fleeing men skidded around a corner, and one of them, clearly desperate, leaped from his horse and ran straight toward the laundry. Rose stumbled backward, but he was faster, grabbing her arm and yanking her in front of him as a shield. She felt the cold metal of a gun barrel pressed against her temple and heard herself make a small, frightened sound. "Stay back or the girl dies," the man shouted at the sheriff, who had rounded the corner with his gun drawn. Rose's vision narrowed to a tunnel. She could feel the man's heart pounding against her back, could smell the sweat and fear on him. Time seemed to stretch and distort. She was vaguely aware of people gathering, of voices shouting, but it all seemed to come from very far away. Then another voice cut through the chaos, calm and steady. "Let her go. She has nothing to do with this." Rose's eyes focused on a man standing off to the side, his hand resting casually on the gun at his hip. He was tall and lean, wearing the worn clothes of a working cowboy, dusty boots, faded denim pants, a shirt that had seen many washings, and a hat that shaded his face. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, even in her terror. They were steady and gray like storm clouds, and they looked at her with something she could not quite identify. Not pity, not fear. Something else. Something that made her feel like he actually saw her. "I said stay back," the outlaw snarled, tightening his grip on Rose. She whimpered despite herself. "You are surrounded," the cowboy continued in that same measured tone. "Your friends already rode off and left you. You have got no horse, no chance of getting out of here. But if you hurt that girl, every man in this town will make sure you hang for it. Let her go now, and maybe you just end up in prison instead of in the ground. Shut up, I will shoot her, I swear I will." "No, you will not." The cowboy's voice held absolute certainty. "Because that is not who you are, I can see it. You are scared and cornered, but you are not a killer. You are just a man who made some bad choices and got in over your head. Do not make it worse. Let the girl go." Rose felt the man's indecision, felt the gun shake slightly against her skin. The cowboy took a slow step forward, his hand still on his weapon but not drawing it, his eyes never leaving the outlaw's face. "Think about it," the cowboy said quietly. "You hurt her, you die today. You let her go, you live. Maybe you serve some time, maybe you get another chance at life. But if you pull that trigger, your story ends right here, right now. Is that what you want?" The silence stretched for an eternity. Then Rose felt the pressure of the gun disappear from her temple, felt the man's arm release her. She stumbled forward, and suddenly the cowboy was there, catching her, his hands steady and warm on her arms. He moved her gently behind him, placing his body between her and the outlaw, who dropped his gun and raised his hands in surrender. The sheriff and deputy rushed forward to apprehend the man. People crowded around, everyone talking at once, but Rose heard none of it. She was staring at the cowboy's back, at the protective stance he had taken, at the calm competence in every movement. When he turned to face her, she found herself looking up into those gray eyes again. "You all right, miss?" he asked, his voice gentle. Rose tried to speak, but no words came. She nodded instead, feeling tears start to slip down her cheeks, the aftermath of terror and adrenaline making her shake. "It is okay," he said softly. "You are safe now, just breathe. You are safe." He did not crowd her or touch her beyond that initial steadying hand. He just stood there, a calm presence, while she struggled to collect herself. Other people tried to push forward to ask her questions, to exclaim over what had happened, but the cowboy somehow kept them at bay with just his presence and a few quiet words. "Give her space. She has had a shock. Let her breathe. Mrs. Chen appeared, pushing through the crowd and wrapping Rose in her arms. Come inside. You sit down, have tea." Rose let herself be led away, but she looked back over her shoulder at the cowboy. He met her eyes and touched the brim of his hat in a small gesture of acknowledgement. Then he was walking away, melting back into the dispersing crowd as if he had not just saved her life with nothing but words and steady courage. "Who was that man?" Rose asked Mrs. Chen, her voice shaky but finally working. "The one who talked the outlaw into letting me go, Mrs. Chen patted her hand. "That is Austin Anders. He works at the Anders Ranch, his family's place, about 5 miles north of town. Good man. Quiet, keeps to himself mostly, but good man." Rose repeated the name silently in her mind. Austin Anders. She wanted to thank him properly, but he had disappeared, and Mrs. Chen was ushering her inside, pressing hot tea into her hands and fussing over her. The other laundry workers gathered around, and for once, Rose did not mind the attention. She was still too shaken to feel self-conscious. That night, she could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the gun at her temple, heard the desperation in the outlaw's voice. But she also heard Austin's calm words, saw those steady gray eyes. He had not panicked. He had not rushed in with violence. He had talked, using reason and compassion to diffuse a deadly situation, and he had protected her, stepped between her and danger without hesitation. The next day, Rose asked Mrs. Chen for directions to the Anders ranch. She needed to thank Austin properly. It was only right. Mrs. Chen gave her a knowing look but supplied the directions. And on Saturday afternoon, Rose borrowed a horse and buggy from Mr. Chen and drove north out of town. The Anders ranch appeared as she came over a low rise, a cluster of buildings arranged around a central yard with corrals and pastures stretching out in all directions. Cattle grazed in the distance, and she could see several men working near the barns. Her courage nearly failed her as she drove up the long approach, but she forced herself to continue. She owed Austin her life. The least she could do was say thank you. She pulled the buggy to a stop near the main house, a solid structure of wood and stone that had clearly been built to last. Before she could climb down, a woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was older, perhaps in her 50s, with gray-streaked hair and a weathered but kind face. "Can I help you, dear?" the woman asked. Rose climbed down carefully. "I am looking for Austin Anders." "Is he here?" "He is my son. He is out in the south pasture checking fences. Is something wrong?" "No, madam. I just wanted to thank him. He helped me a few days ago in town, and I never got the chance to say a proper thank you." Understanding dawned on the woman's face. "You are the girl from the laundry. The one with the outlaw. I heard about that. I am Margaret Anders, Austin's mother. Come inside, have some water. It is a hot day. I will send one of the hands to fetch Austin." Rose wanted to decline, but her throat was parched from the dusty drive, so she followed Margaret into the house. The interior was neat and comfortable, furnished simply but with care. Photographs lined one wall, showing various family members through the years. Margaret poured water from a pitcher and handed Rose a glass, then called out the back door to someone named Hank to go get Austin from the south pasture. "So you are the mail-order bride Walter Higgins rejected," Margaret said matter-of-factly as she sat down across from Rose. "Forgive me for being blunt, but everyone knows the story. Walter is a fool, if you want my opinion. Too concerned with appearances and not enough with substance." Rose felt her cheeks heat, but there was something comforting in Margaret's directness. "I should have been more forthcoming in my letters. I did not explain how shy I am. It was wrong of me." "Nonsense. Being shy is not a character flaw, it is just a temperament. Some people are loud, some are quiet. The quiet ones usually have more going on inside their heads than the loud ones do." Margaret sipped her own water. "What are you doing now? Are you staying in Wasco or going back east? I am not sure yet. I am working at the laundry and boarding with the Chens. I have not decided if I should stay or try to go home." "Do you have home to go back to?" Rose shook her head. "Not really. My aunt's house, but I am not wanted there." "Then stay," Margaret said simply. "California is full of people starting over. You are as entitled to that as anyone else." Before Rose could respond, she heard boots on the porch and then the door opened. Austin Anders stepped inside, pulling off his hat and gloves. He was dustier than he had been in town, and the afternoon light streaming through the window caught in his light brown hair. When he saw Rose sitting at the table, he stopped. "Miss," he said, his voice that same calm tone she remembered, "I did not expect to see you here." Rose stood up quickly, her hands twisting together nervously. "I wanted to thank you for what you did. You saved my life." Austin looked uncomfortable with the praise. He shrugged slightly. "Anyone would have done the same." "No, Rose said firmly, surprised by the strength in her own voice. They would not have. The sheriff had his gun out. Everyone was shouting. You were the only one who stayed calm, who saw that man as a person instead of just a threat. You talked to him like he mattered, and it worked. You saved my life without firing a single shot. That is remarkable. A faint color rose in Austin's tan cheeks. I just did what made sense. Violence usually just makes things worse. Margaret watched them both with interest. Austin has always been like that. Even as a boy, he could calm the wildest horse, settle the most skittish calf. He has a gift for peace. She stood up. I need to go check on the stew for dinner. Austin, why do not you show Miss? I am sorry I did not catch your name. Rose Dalton. Why do not you show Miss Dalton around the ranch a bit before she has to drive back to town? It is a nice afternoon for a walk. Before either of them could protest, Margaret had disappeared into the kitchen. Austin looked at Rose, and she saw uncertainty in his eyes. She realized he was just as uncomfortable with social interactions as she was, though perhaps for different reasons. You do not have to, Rose said quickly. I did not mean to impose. I just wanted to say thank you. I do not mind, Austin said, and something in his voice told her he meant it. It is a nice afternoon. The ranch is pretty this time of year when the heat starts to break. Would you like to walk a bit? Rose nodded, and they stepped outside together. Austin led her away from the main buildings toward a path that wound along a small creek. The evening was coming on, and the light had turned golden, painting everything in warm tones. They walked in silence for a few minutes, and Rose found it was not an awkward silence. It was comfortable, easy, the kind of quiet that felt natural rather than forced. Your mother said you are good with horses, Rose ventured after a while. I like them. They are honest. They do not play games or pretend to be something they are not. They just are what they are. Austin picked up a stick and tossed it into the creek, watching the water carry it away. I have always gotten along better with animals than people, I suppose. I understand that, Rose said softly. I have always found people difficult. I never know what to say or how to act. Words get stuck inside me, especially around strangers. It has always been that way. Austin glanced at her, and something in his expression shifted. Is that why Walter Higgins sent you away? Rose nodded, shame flooding through her again. He said I was too quiet, that he needed a wife who could be social, who could entertain guests and represent him at church functions. He said I was like a mouse. Walter Higgins is an idiot, Austin said bluntly. Then he seemed to catch himself. Sorry, I should not speak ill of people. But truly, if he could not see past your shyness to who you really are, then he did not deserve you. You should not feel ashamed of being quiet. There is nothing wrong with it. They had reached a place where the creek widened into a small pool, reflecting the sky. Austin gestured to a fallen log near the water's edge, and they both sat down. Rose found herself relaxing in a way she had not since arriving in California. Maybe it was the beauty of the evening, or maybe it was something about Austin himself. He did not push her to talk, did not seem bothered by the silences between them. What do you do here? Rose asked. On the ranch, I mean. Everything, I suppose. My father died 2 years ago, so now it is just my mother, my younger brother Jack, and me running the place. We have got about 300 head of cattle, some horses. We hire extra hands during roundup and branding, but mostly we manage on our own. Jack handles a lot of the business side, dealing with buyers and such. He is better at talking than I am. I prefer working with the animals, fixing fences, that kind of thing. Do you like it? Ranch life? Austin was quiet for a moment, considering. Yes, I cannot imagine doing anything else. The work is hard, and sometimes it feels like you are fighting against everything, the weather and the market, and just trying to survive. But there is something good about it too. Something honest. You put in the work and you see the results. You take care of the land and the animals, and they take care of you. It makes sense to me in a way a lot of other things do not. Rose understood exactly what he meant. That sense of purpose, of honest work yielding honest results. She felt it at the laundry, that simple satisfaction of seeing dirty clothes become clean, of completing a task well. It was one of the few times she did not feel anxious or inadequate. I feel that way about sewing, she offered. And washing, actually. People laugh at me for liking laundry work, but I do. You start with something soiled and stained, and you work at it, and eventually it comes clean. There is something satisfying about that, about seeing the evidence of your effort. Austin turned to look at her fully, and in the golden light, his gray eyes were warm. That is not silly at all. I think that makes perfect sense. They talked more as the sun sank lower, and Rose was amazed at how easy it was. Austin did not fill every silence with chatter, did not seem to expect her to perform or be something she was not. He asked her questions about Missouri, about her journey west, and he listened to her answers with genuine interest. She learned that he was 26, that he had never married because he had been too busy helping his father build the ranch and then taking over after his death. She learned that he loved reading when he had time, especially adventure novels and anything about natural history. "I should get back before dark," Rose said finally, reluctantly. The thought of leaving this peaceful space, this comfortable companionship, filled her with unexpected sadness. Austin walked her back to the buggy. As she climbed up onto the seat, he looked up at her. "Thank you for coming." "For saying thank you, I mean. You did not have to do that." "I wanted to," Rose said. "It was important to me." "Maybe," Austin hesitated, then seemed to gather his courage. "Maybe you could come back sometime if you wanted. To visit, I mean. My mother would like that. She does not get much female company out here." Rose felt warmth spread through her chest. "I would like that very much." She drove back to town as twilight fell, and the whole way she could not stop smiling. There was something about Austin Anders that called to something deep inside her. Maybe it was that he understood quietness, valued it even. Or maybe it was simply that around him, she did not feel like she needed to be anyone other than exactly who she was. Over the following weeks, Rose found reasons to visit the Anders ranch. She would bring baked goods she had made in Mrs. Chen's kitchen, or offer to help Margaret with mending. Margaret welcomed her warmly each time, and Austin would always appear from whatever work he was doing to spend time with her. They would walk along the creek, or sit on the porch in the evening, talking about everything and nothing. Rose learned that Austin had a quiet sense of humor that emerged once he felt comfortable. He would make dry observations about things that would make her laugh, a sound she had not heard from herself in months. He told her stories about the ranch, about difficult calvings he had managed and horses he had gentled. She told him about the books she loved, about the poetry she sometimes wrote in secret, about her dreams of having a little house with a garden. "Why in secret?" Austin asked when she mentioned her poetry. "Poetry is nothing to be ashamed of. People think it is foolish. My aunt used to say I was wasting time, that I should focus on practical things. Will you show me sometime? Your poetry?" Rose felt panic flutter in her chest. Her writing was so personal, so revealing. But when she looked at Austin, saw the genuine interest in his face with no mockery or judgment, she found herself nodding. Maybe, someday. The town gossips had noticed Rose's frequent trips to the Anders ranch, of course. One afternoon at the laundry, Mrs. Chen mentioned with a smile that people were talking about Rose and Austin. Rose felt her face heat with embarrassment and anxiety. "Do not worry," Mrs. Chen assured her. "They say nice things. They say Austin Anders is a good man, that you two fit together well. Quiet people understand each other." But not everyone was so kind. Rose encountered Walter Higgins one day in the general store, and he looked at her with a sneer. "I see you found someone else to take pity on you. Austin Anders is nearly as strange as you are, never talking to anyone, always keeping to himself. I suppose you two deserve each other." The word stung, but Rose forced herself to meet his eyes. "Austin is worth 10 of you," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "He sees people for who they really are, not just for what they can do for him. I am grateful every day that you rejected me, because it meant I was free to meet someone who actually values kindness over appearances." Walter's face turned red, but Rose did not wait to hear his response. She walked out of the store with her head high, her heart pounding. She could not believe she had just said that, had actually stood up for herself and for Austin. But the words had been true, every one of them. That evening she drove out to the ranch to tell Austin what had happened. He was working in one of the corrals, training a young horse on a lead line. Rose watched him for a few minutes before he noticed her. His movements were patient and calm, never forcing the horse, just guiding it gently until it responded to the slightest pressure on the rope. When he saw her, his face lit up in a way that made Rose's heart skip. He handed the lead to one of the ranch hands and came over to the fence. "This is a nice surprise," he said. "I was not expecting you today. I had to tell you something." Rose related the encounter with Walter, and Austin listened with a darkening expression. "He had no right to speak to you that way," Austin said quietly. "He had no right to speak about either of us that way." "I know. But Austin, he said we are both strange, both too quiet and odd." "Do you think that is true? Do you think there is something wrong with us?" Austin was silent for a long moment. Then he opened the corral gate and took Rose's hand, leading her over to a bench near the barn. They sat down and he kept hold of her hand, his calloused fingers warm around hers. "Rose, look at me," he said softly. When she met his eyes, he continued. "There is nothing wrong with being quiet. There is nothing wrong with preferring peace to chaos, or needing time alone to think, or not wanting to fill every silence with noise. The world needs quiet people just as much as it needs loud ones. Maybe more, because we are the ones who actually listen. We are the ones who notice things, who think before we speak, who care about getting things right instead of just getting attention." His words settled into Rose's heart like a balm on a wound. She realized she had been carrying shame about her nature for so long that it had become part of how she saw herself. But Austin was right. Being quiet was not a flaw. It was just who she was. "Your quiet is my peace," Austin said, his voice rough with emotion. "When I am with you, I do not feel like I have to perform or pretend to be someone I am not. I can just be myself, and that is enough. You make me feel like I am enough, Rose, exactly as I am, and I hope I do the same for you." Tears filled Rose's eyes, but they were good tears. "You do," she whispered. "Austin, you do. I have never felt so accepted, so understood, not in my whole life." Austin reached up and gently wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "Then Walter Higgins was right about one thing. We do deserve each other. Not because we are strange or odd, but because we understand each other, because we see each other truly and value what we see." They sat in the fading light, hands clasped, and Rose felt something shift inside her. This was what love felt like, she realized. Not the desperate hope she had felt coming to California as a mail-order bride, not the anxiety of trying to be someone she was not. Real love was this, being seen completely and accepted completely. It was finding someone whose presence brought peace instead of panic. It was Austin's steady gray eyes and quiet strength, his patience and his understanding. "Rose," Austin said after a while, his voice hesitant. "I know we have not been acquainted very long, only a couple of months, but I feel like I have known you much longer. Like I have been waiting to meet you without knowing it, and I need to tell you that my feelings for you have grown into something deep and real. I am in love with you, Rose Dalton. I know that might be too soon or too much, but I needed you to know." Rose's breath caught in her throat. She looked at their joined hands, at Austin's face open and vulnerable in the twilight, and she felt her heart overflow with an emotion so strong it almost frightened her. "It is not too soon," she said, her voice shaking. "Austin, I love you too. I think I started falling in love with you the day you saved me, when you looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth protecting. And every moment since then, I have fallen deeper. You make me feel brave. You make me feel like maybe I am not broken after all, just different. And different is okay when you are with someone who values who you really are." Austin stood up and pulled Rose gently to her feet. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch reverent and careful, and looked into her eyes with such tenderness that Rose felt like she might burst from the sweetness of it. "May I kiss you?" he asked softly. Rose nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in her throat. Austin leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, gentle and sweet, a kiss that tasted of promise and hope in coming home. Rose's hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart beating steady and strong under her palms. The world around them seemed to fade away until there was nothing but this moment, this perfect, quiet moment of connection. When they finally pulled apart, Austin rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he whispered. "I know it is fast. I know we should probably wait longer, but Rose, I do not want to wait. I want to wake up every morning with you beside me. I want to build a life with you. I want to give you that house with a garden you dream about. Marry me." Rose laughed and cried at the same time. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Austin, I will marry you." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Wasco. Margaret cried happy tears and welcomed Rose as a daughter. Jack, Austin's younger brother, who was 23 and full of energy that contrasted sharply with Austin's calm nature, gave them his boisterous blessing. The Chens came, and many of the other townspeople Rose had gotten to know through her work at the laundry. Even some of the ranching families who were neighbors to the Anders came to celebrate. Walter Higgins did not attend, of course, but Rose barely thought of him. How could she, when Austin stood beside her in his best clothes, looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world? How could she focus on anything but the vows they spoke to each other, the promises they made before God and community to love and honor each other for the rest of their days? The ceremony was simple and quiet, exactly what both of them wanted. Rose wore a new dress that Margaret had helped her sew, pale blue with white lace at the collar and cuffs. Austin had gotten a haircut and shaved carefully, and he could not seem to stop smiling. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Austin kissed Rose with such joy and tenderness that several people in the congregation sighed audibly. The celebration afterward at the ranch was lively, but not overwhelming. Margaret had prepared a feast, and Jack made a toast that made everyone laugh. As evening fell and people began to leave, Rose found herself alone with Austin on the porch of what was now their home. Austin had spent the last few weeks preparing a private bedroom for them in a newly built addition to the main house, wanting to give them space while still being close to Margaret. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Anders?" Austin asked, wrapping his arm around her waist and pulling her close. "Like I am dreaming," Rose admitted. "A few months ago, I stepped off a stagecoach expecting to marry a stranger who turned out not to want me. And now I am married to you, to the best man I have ever known. It does not feel quite real." "It is real," Austin assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And it is forever. You are stuck with me now." "I can think of worse fates," Rose teased, and Austin laughed, a sound she loved more each time she heard it. Their wedding night was tender and intimate, both of them nervous but deeply in love. Austin was patient and gentle, making sure Rose felt safe and cherished every moment. Afterward, they lay wrapped in each other's arms, talking quietly until they fell asleep. The weeks and months that followed were the happiest of Rose's life. She settled into the rhythm of ranch life, discovering that she had a talent for working with the chickens and the kitchen garden. Margaret taught her to make bread and preserve vegetables, and the two women developed a close relationship that filled the mother-shaped hole in Rose's heart. Jack teased her affectionately and told Austin regularly how lucky he was, which always made Austin agree wholeheartedly. But it was her relationship with Austin that truly flourished. They worked side by side during the day, whether she was helping him doctor a sick calf or he was helping her weed the garden. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, not needing to fill the silence with constant conversation. They learned each other's rhythms and needs, the way couples do when they are truly paying attention. Austin encouraged Rose to pursue her writing, buying her a beautiful leather journal from the general store. She began to fill it with poems and observations, sometimes reading them aloud to him in the privacy of their room. His praise was always genuine and thoughtful, never empty flattery. Rose, in turn, learned to see past Austin's quiet exterior to the deeply passionate and caring man beneath. He might not be effusive with his words, but his actions spoke volumes. The way he brought her wildflowers from the range, the way he made sure she had the easiest chores on days when she was not feeling well, the way he listened intently to everything she said as if her thoughts were the most important things in the world. Their first winter together brought cold rain and occasional frost. Rose discovered that she loved winter evenings when they would sit by the fire with books or handiwork, Austin reading aloud sometimes from the novels he loved. He had a good reading voice, expressive without being theatrical, and Rose would lose herself in the stories he shared. Spring brought the busy season of calving, and Rose learned to help with the newborn animals. She had a gentle touch that the nervous mothers responded to, and Austin was proud of how quickly she learned. They worked long hours together, exhausted but satisfied, falling into bed each night too tired for anything but sleep but happy in their shared purpose. It was in late spring that Rose realized she was expecting a child. She had suspected for a few weeks, but when the doctor confirmed it, she felt a mix of joy and terror. She told Austin that evening as they sat by the creek, their special place. A baby. Austin's face went through a series of expressions, shock, then wonder, then pure joy. Rose, truly, we are going to have a baby in the winter, the doctor thinks, January or February. Rose watched his face anxiously. Are you happy? I know it is sooner than we might have planned. Happy. Austin pulled her into his arms, laughing. Rose, I am beyond happy. I am ecstatic. We are going to be parents. We are going to have a little person who is part you and part me. How could I be anything but thrilled? His joy eased Rose's anxiety. They told Margaret and Jack that evening, and Margaret cried happy tears again, already talking about turning one of the spare rooms into a nursery. Jack immediately began planning how they would handle the increased workload once Rose could not do as much physical labor. The pregnancy was mostly smooth, though Rose suffered from tiredness and occasional nausea in the first months. Austin was attentive and protective without being overbearing, making sure she did not overdo it but also not treating her like she was made of glass. As her belly grew through the summer and fall, Rose found herself marveling at the life growing inside her. She and Austin would lie in bed at night with his hand on her stomach, feeling the baby kick and move, imagining what their child would be like. You think the baby will be quiet like us? Rose wondered one night in November. Maybe, Austin said. Or maybe the baby will be loud and boisterous like Jack. Either way, we will love this child exactly as they are. We will teach them that there is no right way to be, only authentic ways. That being true to yourself is more important than fitting into anyone else's expectations. Rose felt tears prick her eyes, hormones making her more emotional than usual. You are going to be such a good father. I am going to try, Austin said seriously. I want our child to grow up feeling loved and accepted. I want them to have the confidence to be themselves, whatever that means. The confidence neither of us had growing up. They will have that, Rose assured him. Between you, me, Margaret, and Jack, this baby is going to have so much love. The first pains came on a cold January night in 1885. Margaret sent Jack racing for the doctor while she and Austin prepared the bedroom. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Austin stayed by Rose's side the entire time, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, refusing to leave even when Margaret suggested he might want to wait elsewhere. I am not going anywhere, he told Rose firmly. We are in this together. Always. Finally, as the afternoon sun slanted through the window, Rose pushed their baby into the world. The doctor held up a squalling, red-faced infant and announced, "It is a boy, a healthy baby boy." Austin cut the cord with shaking hands while Margaret cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket. Then she placed the tiny bundle in Rose's arms, and Rose looked down at her son's face with wonder. He had stopped crying and was looking up at her with dark, unfocused eyes. He was perfect from his tiny fingers to his wrinkled little toes. "Hello, little one," Rose whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Austin sat beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders, staring at their son with an expression of absolute awe. "He is perfect." "Rose, he is absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months without settling on anything definite, but looking at her son now, Rose knew. "Adam," she said. "Adam Anders. It means of the earth, and he is going to grow up on this land, connected to it the way his father is." "Adam," Austin repeated, testing the name. "Yes, that is exactly right." He gently touched the baby's cheek with one finger, and Adam turned his head toward the touch. "Welcome to the world, Adam Anders. Your mama and I love you more than you will ever know." The early weeks of parenthood were exhausting but wonderful. Adam turned out to be a relatively easy baby, sleeping in decent stretches and feeding well. Rose was grateful for Margaret's help and experience, and for Austin's willingness to get up in the night to change diapers or walk with a fussy baby, so Rose could sleep. As winter gave way to spring, and Adam grew from a tiny newborn into a sturdy infant, Rose and Austin marveled at every milestone. His first smile, the way his eyes focused and began to track movement, the day he discovered his own hands. They were besotted parents, both of them, though Austin would probably have been embarrassed to admit how much time he spent just watching his son sleep. "He is going to be smart," Austin announced one evening when Adam was about 4 months old. The baby was lying on a blanket on the porch, batting at a wooden rattle Margaret had made. "Look at how focused he is. You can see him figuring things out." "He gets that from his father," Rose said with a smile. She was sitting in her rocking chair, working on a new shirt for Adam. He was growing so fast she could barely keep him in clothes. "And his sweet nature from his mother," Austin countered. He scooped Adam up and held him high, making the baby laugh, a sound that never failed to delight both parents. "Are you a happy boy?" "Yes, you are. Yes, you are." Rose laughed at Austin's uncharacteristic baby talk. Fatherhood had brought out a softness in him that was beautiful to see. He was endlessly patient with Adam, never frustrated even when the baby was fussy or difficult. He would walk the floor for hours if needed, singing soft songs or just talking to Adam about the ranch, the animals, whatever came to mind. As Adam grew into a toddler and then a little boy, it became clear he had inherited both his parents' quieter natures. He was observant and thoughtful, more interested in watching ants carry crumbs or examining the patterns of leaves than in rough play. Austin taught him about the animals and the land, and Adam soaked up knowledge like a sponge. Rose taught him letters and numbers, reading to him every evening, delighting in his quick mind and curious questions. "You think he is too quiet?" Rose asked Austin when Adam was 3. They were watching their son play by himself in the yard, building an elaborate structure with sticks and rocks. "Should we worry?" "Absolutely not," Austin said firmly. "He is perfect exactly as he is. He is happy, he is healthy, he is smart and kind." "So what if he prefers his own company sometimes? So do we. There is nothing wrong with him, Rose. He is just our son through and through." Rose leaned against her husband's side, grateful for his certainty. Austin was right, of course. Adam was thriving and his quiet nature was not a problem. It was just who he was. When Adam was 4, Rose discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, or perhaps because she was too busy chasing an active 4-year-old to dwell on her discomforts. Austin was just as excited and attentive as he had been the first time, and Adam, after having it explained to him that he was going to be a big brother, was cautiously interested. "Will the baby be loud?" Adam asked seriously. "Jack is loud sometimes and it hurts my ears." Rose and Austin exchanged amused glances. Jack was indeed loud, boisterous, and friendly. Everything Austin was not. He had recently married a local girl named Sarah who was just as outgoing as he was, and their presence could be a bit overwhelming for both Adam and his parents at times. "We do not know if the baby will be loud or quiet yet," Rose explained. "Babies are all different, but no matter what, this baby will be your brother or sister and you will love them, and if they are too loud sometimes, you can always come find Papa or me and we will help you." Their daughter was born in early autumn of 1889, an easier birth than Adam's had been. She came into the world with a lusty cry that she sustained for several minutes, causing Jack to laugh and say, "Well, I guess this one is not going to be shy." They named her Rachel Deanne, after Rose's mother and Austin's grandmother. Rachel was indeed louder than Adam had been as a baby, more demanding of attention and quicker to make her displeasure known. But she was also joyful and affectionate, quick to smile and laugh. As she grew, it became clear she had a personality all her own, different from both her parents and her brother. "She is going to keep us on our toes," Austin said one evening when Rachel was about 18 months old. She had just thrown a spectacular tantrum because Rose had said no to giving her a cookie before dinner, and they had both been exhausted by the time she finally calmed down. "I have no idea where she gets this from," Rose said with a laugh. "Neither of us were ever like this as children, I am sure." "Maybe she is balancing Adam out," Austin suggested. "One quiet, thoughtful child and one loud, spirited one. We get the full range of human experience." As the children grew, so did the ranch. With Jack's business acumen and Austin's skill with the land and animals, the Anders Ranch became one of the most prosperous in the area. They expanded their herds, improved their breeding stock, and built a reputation for quality that brought buyers from as far away as San Francisco. Rose had found her own niche as well. She had started selling her baked goods in town and discovered she had a talent for it. Soon, she had a thriving small business, supplying bread and pastries to several establishments in Wasco. It gave her pin money of her own and a sense of accomplishment beyond her roles as wife and mother. Margaret had slowed down with age but remained a vital part of the household, teaching Rachel to cook and keeping an eye on the children when Rose and Austin were busy with ranch work. She was in her late 60s now, her hair completely white, but her mind remained sharp and her love for her family undiminished. Life was not without its challenges, of course. There were drought years when the grass turned brown and they had to sell off part of the herd. There were illnesses and accidents, the normal trials of life. But through it all, Rose and Austin faced everything together, their bond growing stronger with each passing year. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Austin surprised Rose with a small house he had built on a piece of land about half a mile from the main ranch house. It was everything she had once dreamed of: 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a front porch, and room for a substantial garden. "I know the main house is crowded sometimes with all of us," Austin explained as he led her through the empty rooms. "And I thought maybe we could use our own space. The children are getting older, needing more room, and I wanted to give you the house with a garden you always talked about. We can move our family here and visit the main house for meals and work, but have our own place to retreat to. What do you think?" Rose was crying too hard to answer immediately. She wrapped her arms around her husband and held him tight. "It is perfect," she finally managed. "Austin, it is absolutely perfect. Thank you. Thank you for remembering what I dreamed about, for making it real." They moved into the new house that summer. Adam, now 10 years old, was excited to have his own bedroom instead of sharing space with his sister. Rachel, at 6, was more interested in the fact that there were rabbits living in the brush near the house, and could she please have one as a pet. Rose created her dream garden, growing vegetables and flowers, herbs and berries. Austin built her a bench under a cottonwood tree where she could sit and write in the cool of the evening. It became her favorite spot, and many nights Austin would find her there, journal in hand, capturing moments and emotions in verse. One evening when she was 37 and Austin was 41, they sat together on that bench, watching Adam and Rachel play with Jack and Sarah's children in the yard. Adam was patient with the younger kids, showing them how to catch grasshoppers. Rachel was organizing them into some kind of elaborate game that seemed to involve a lot of running and shouting. "Can you believe this is our life?" Rose asked softly. "Sometimes I still cannot quite grasp it, that I am actually this happy, that all of this is real." Austin took her hand, his thumb rubbing over her knuckles in the familiar gesture he had done 1,000 times. "I can believe it. You deserve every bit of happiness you have, Rose. You deserve this life, this family. I thank God every day that Walter Higgins was fool enough to reject you. Because it meant you were free to find me, to build this life with me." "Your quiet is my peace," Rose quoted softly, remembering those words Austin had spoken to her so many years ago. "You told me that once, do you remember? When I was worried that being quiet meant there was something wrong with us. I remember, and it is still true. Your quiet is still my peace, Rose. You are my peace, my home, my everything. That has not changed in all these years. It never will." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The children's laughter floated on the evening air. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed peacefully. The ranch stretched around them, solid and real, the product of years of hard work and dedication. Rose thought about the frightened, rejected woman she had been when she first arrived in Wasco. She thought about standing in the street, humiliated and lost, thinking her life was over. And then she thought about Austin, stepping forward to protect her from danger, seeing her truly from the very beginning. "I love you," she said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she spoke them. "I love you so much, Austin Anders. I love you too, Rose Anders. With all my heart, for all my days." They kissed as the last light faded from the sky, two quiet souls who had found in each other exactly what they needed. Not someone to change them or fix them, but someone to accept them, to cherish them, to understand that being quiet was not a flaw but a gift. Someone whose presence brought peace instead of panic. The children called for them, wanting them to come see something exciting, and Austin and Rose stood up together, hands still linked, and walked toward their family. Their life was not perfect, but it was theirs. Built on honesty and acceptance, on patience and understanding, on a love that had grown from those first tentative conversations into something deep and unshakable. As the years continued to pass, Rose and Austin grew older together with grace. They watched Adam grow into a young man who combined his father's quiet competence with his mother's thoughtful introspection. At 18, he began courting a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread, a quiet girl much like his mother. Rose and Austin approved wholeheartedly, seeing in the young couple the same compatibility they themselves shared. Rachel, true to her spirited nature, became interested in education and announced at 16 that she wanted to become a teacher. It was an uncommon ambition, but Rose and Austin supported her dream, proud of her determination and intelligence. They helped her prepare for the examinations she would need to pass and celebrated with her when she received her teaching certificate at age 18. Margaret lived to see her grandchildren grown, passing away peacefully in her sleep at 74. Her death was mourning deeply, but also celebrated as the culmination of a life well lived. She had seen her ranch thrive, her sons happily married, her grandchildren launched into the world. She had found in Rose the daughter she had always wanted, and she had told Rose so many times in her final years. Jack and Sarah had 4 children of their own, loud and energetic like their parents, filling the main ranch house with chaos and joy. The cousins grew up together, and though their personalities varied wildly, they were close, united by family bonds and shared experience. When Rose was 45 and Austin was 49, they became grandparents for the first time. Adam and his wife Emma had a daughter, a tiny thing with dark hair and solemn eyes who reminded everyone of Adam himself. Rose held her granddaughter for the first time and felt her heart expand yet again, amazed that she could feel this much love. "We are getting old," Austin joked that evening as they sat on their porch swing, a fixture he had added to the house several years back. "Grandparents. When did that happen?" "Gradually," Rose said with a smile. "The same way everything else happened. One day at a time, one moment at a time. And I would not change a single thing." More grandchildren followed over the years. Rachel married a banker's son from town when she was 24, a man who supported her teaching career and shared her love of books and learning. They had 2 sons who were as bookish as their mother. Adam and Emma had 2 more children. The Anders family continued to grow and flourish. On Rose and Austin's 25th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren organized a celebration at the ranch. The whole family gathered, along with many friends from town and neighboring ranches. The Chens came, their own children and grandchildren in tow. Mrs. Chen, now in her 70s, embraced Rose warmly. "You see," she said, "I told you you had good heart. Someone saw it. You find your place." "I did," Rose agreed. "Thanks in part to you. You took me in when I had nowhere else to go." I will never forget that kindness. As the party wound down and the guests began to leave, Rose and Austin found themselves alone on their porch again, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. 25 years of marriage. More than half Rose's life spent with this man, building a life together, raising children, weathering storms both literal and figurative. You ever think about what would have happened if Walter Higgins had not rejected me? Rose asked. If I had married him like I was supposed to? Austin was quiet for a moment. I used to sometimes in the early years. I would lie awake at night thinking about how easily I could have never met you, how one different choice could have meant I spent my whole life alone. It used to terrify me. And now I do not think about it. Because it did not happen. Walter did reject you and you were free and we found each other. That is what matters, not what could have been, but what is. Rose leaned her head on his shoulder. You are right, as usual. Well, let us not make a habit of it, Austin teased. You will stop taking me seriously if I am right too often. They laughed together, the easy laughter of people who knew each other completely. Rose thought about the quiet girl she had been, so afraid of being herself, so convinced there was something wrong with her. And she thought about the woman she had become, confident in who she was, surrounded by love, her life rich and full. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For seeing me. For valuing my quiet instead of trying to change it. For making me feel like I was enough exactly as I was. For loving me so well for so long. Austin shifted so he could look at her properly. Even at nearly 50, he was still handsome to her eyes, his hair now streaked with silver, his face lined by years of sun and wind and smiles. His eyes were still that same steady gray that had captured her heart all those years ago. Rose, you have always been enough, more than enough. You have been everything. You gave me a life I did not even know I wanted until I met you. You gave me children, a home, a partnership that has made every single day better than the one before. If anyone should be saying thank you, it is me. Then we will both say it, Rose decided. Thank you, Austin, for being exactly who you are. Thank you for choosing me, for building this life with me. Thank you, Rose, for the same, for being my partner, my love, my peace. They kissed, soft and sweet, a kiss that contained 25 years of love and commitment and shared life. A kiss that promised many more years to come. As they finally went inside for the night, Rose took one last look at the land spreading around them, dark and peaceful under the stars. This ranch, this life, this family, it was all beyond anything she had dreamed of when she stepped off that stagecoach in Wasco all those years ago. She had come west looking for a husband, for security, for a place to belong. And she had found all that and so much more. She had found love, real and deep and lasting. She had found acceptance, the freedom to be fully herself without apology. She had found purpose and meaning in her children and grandchildren, in her writing and her baking, in the daily rhythms of ranch life. She had found home, not just a physical place, but a sense of belonging that went soul deep. And she had found Austin, her quiet cowboy with his steady eyes and gentle hands, who had looked at her shyness and seen not a flaw but a gift, who had spoken those words that changed everything. Your quiet is my peace. Those words had been a key, unlocking a future Rose had not known was possible. A future where being herself was not just acceptable but celebrated, where her quiet nature was valued rather than criticized, where she could finally rest in the knowledge that she was loved exactly as she was. The years continued their steady march. Rose and Austin grew older, their hair turning silver, their movements slower but still sure. They remained on the ranch, though Adam and his family moved into the main house to take over the primary operations. Austin still worked every day, unable to fully retire from the land he loved, and Rose still tended her garden and baked her bread, finding peace in the familiar routines. They celebrated their 30th anniversary, then their 35th. They welcomed more grandchildren, and then great-grandchildren. The family they had created continued to grow and spread, a testament to the love they had built their lives on. When Rose was 60 and Austin was 64, they took a rare trip away from the ranch, traveling by train to San Francisco. It was an adventure, seeing the city with its bustle and noise, its grand buildings and crowded streets. They enjoyed it, but after a week, they were both ready to go home. "Too many people," Austin said as they boarded the train back to Wasco. "Too much noise. I miss the quiet." "Me too," Rose agreed. "I missed our porch and our garden and the sound of the wind through the cottonwoods. I missed home." "We are getting old and set in our ways," Austin observed. "Yes," Rose said contentedly. "And there is nothing wrong with that." Back at the ranch, back in their little house with its now mature garden and well-worn furniture, they settled back into their life with relief. This was where they belonged, where they had always belonged. One evening not long after their return, they sat on their porch swing as they had done thousands of times before. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear Adam calling instructions to ranch hands. Closer by, they could hear Rachel's children laughing as they played. "This is a good life," Rose said simply. "The best life," Austin agreed. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. His hands were more gnarled now, marked by decades of hard work, but to Rose they were still the most beautiful hands in the world. These were the hands that had gentled horses and delivered calves, built fences and cradled babies. These were the hands that had held hers through joy and sorrow, through easy times and hard. "You remember what you said to me once?" Austin asked. "That first evening when you came to the ranch to thank me for helping you. You said you did not know what to say or how to act, that words got stuck inside you." "I remember. That has not changed much over the years, has it? I am still shy, still quiet." "Yes, but you are not afraid anymore. That is what has changed. You are still quiet, but it is a peaceful quiet now, not a fearful one. You are comfortable with who you are. That is what I see when I look at you, Rose. A woman at peace with herself." Rose considered this. He was right. Somewhere over the years, the fear that had always accompanied her shyness had faded away. She no longer worried about what people thought of her silence. She no longer felt broken or wrong. She was simply herself, quiet and thoughtful and content. "You gave me that," she told Austin. "That peace. Your acceptance, your love, your constant assurance that I was enough, that gave me the courage to accept myself." "We gave it to each other," Austin corrected. "Because you did the same for me, Rose. You made me feel understood in a way I never had before. You made my own quietness feel like a strength instead of a weakness. We healed each other, I think." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged one by one. The night sounds of the ranch surrounded them, cattle settling for the night, horses moving in the corral, an owl calling from the barn. These were the sounds of home, as familiar as their own heartbeats. "I love you," Rose said, as she had said countless times over the years. The words never grew stale or routine. They were always true, always necessary. "I love you," Austin replied, as he always did. "My Rose, my peace, my home." They stayed on the porch until the night grew cool, then went inside together, still holding hands. They prepared for bed in the easy synchronization of a couple who had shared space for decades, moving around each other smoothly, anticipating each other's needs without needing to speak. In bed, Rose curled against Austin's side, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her. This position, too, was familiar, worn smooth by years of repetition. It was how they had slept almost every night of their marriage, drawing comfort from each other's presence even in sleep. "Good night, my love," Austin murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Good night," Rose whispered back. "Sweet dreams." She closed her eyes, listening to the steady rhythm of Austin's breathing, feeling the rise and fall of his chest beneath her cheek. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from that terrified girl on the stagecoach to this contented woman in her own home, surrounded by family, filled with love. It had not been an easy journey. There had been pain and fear, rejection and shame. But all of it had been necessary to bring her to this moment, to this life, to this man. And she would not change a single step of the path, because every step had led her home. Rose drifted off to sleep with a smile on her face, Austin's arm warm around her, the sounds of the ranch lulling her into dreams. And in those dreams, she walked through her garden in eternal sunshine, Austin beside her, both of them young and strong again, but carrying all the wisdom and love of their years together. In those dreams, she was free, she was loved, she was home. The years ahead would bring more changes, more challenges, more joys and sorrows. There would be losses and celebrations, struggles and triumphs. But through it all, Rose and Austin would face everything together, their bond unbreakable, their love constant. They had found what so many people search for their entire lives. A partner who truly understood them, who valued them exactly as they were, who made life not just bearable but beautiful. They had found their peace in each other's quiet, and that peace had sustained them through decades of life together. And when their time finally came, when they were old and gray and ready to rest, they would go knowing they had lived well, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy of family and love that would continue long after they were gone. They would go peacefully, together if possible, because they had been together in everything else. But that time was still ahead. For now, they slept peacefully in each other's arms, two quiet souls who had found their home in each other, grateful every day for the rejection that had set them both free to find true love. The mail-order bride who had been deemed too shy and the cowboy who had seen her quiet as peace, they had built a beautiful life together, one quiet, contented day at a time. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.